What do innovation professionals actually do? And how do they do it? How do designers create new products, services, strategies and systems? And how do they overcome barriers to make change happen? Welcome to Idea Work, the podcast about the people, skills and mindsets behind innovation. I'm Michael Walter, and I'm glad you've joined me. Whether you're starting out in innovation, shifting careers, or just curious, you're in the right place. Let's discover what makes ideas work. Welcome everyone to the last phase of the Double Diamond, the deliver phase. So together we have gone through a journey of hearing a problem that is being faced by a client. In this case, it's a university that international students aren't utilising the medical services of the university. We then did research in this space, interviewing people from international students and interviewing university staff who work in these spaces. From all that research, we got to a lot of research and then went through the define phase and actually reframed the problem space and to focus on a specific area that was achievable with the time that was given. Then started coming up with lots of ideas. That's what the last episode was about. In the develop phase, doing lots of ideation and brainstorming and thinking of all different solutions. Now, at the end of this phase and leading into the deliver phase, this might be a good time to meet with the client again. You might choose as a team before you meet with them 2 or 3 ideas that you think are really promising based on that evaluation process we went through. And then you would present these ideas back to the client to get their thoughts on what they might want. This could be through a meeting, which could be like a workshop, or it could just be an email. It really depends on how much budget you have, how much time the client is willing to spend on the process. But really, how much time you're willing to spend as well, because if you need to be able to pay for your time as part of the budgeting process. So you'll get a checkpoint meeting where you share the 3 ideas, and then you might leave it to them to decide which one they want to proceed with. So you might share your top 3 ideas, and they say, this idea around events is fantastic and it's something that's achievable and something we can do, and we're willing to proceed with that. Please share with us in your report the other ideas you had, because we might have some further capacity to develop those ideas later on. So align with your client before you build. Check in with them, ask what resonates most, and gather feedback. In this way, you might also include them in the design process, because they might have some ideas on how you can further elaborate on it. They might have some critiques about the idea, and in this way, you're already starting the deliver process. So the deliver phase is taking the idea and refining it, and like how the define is a converging diamond, this is another converging diamond where you're going from lots of different things and lots of different ideas, and it's quite broad, to something that is quite specific and usable, really grounded in your research and in what people need. So this is a phase where you do lots of prototyping and testing. You take the solution, the idea that you've got, and you work towards making it real to something that can actually be delivered. That's why it's called delivered, something that can be delivered to the client as a somewhat finished piece. I say somewhat, and I'll explain that later. So with prototyping, the idea is to create a tangible version of the idea that someone can interact with, like the client or the user who's going to be using the object or the thing, and you get feedback. So what's a really good principle with prototyping is to keep it rough. Don't make it perfect. If you make something perfect, say for example, you decide that you're going to create an app. If you make it in Figma and it looks like the final version, a high fidelity version of the prototype, people might be less likely to give feedback unless they're an expert and they can look past it. But most people don't want to upset you, and so they'll say, this looks great, this is so good. But if you make it a sketch, like a wireframe it's called, where it's really, you've drawn the app on paper and you get the different pages and it's a bit messy, people feel like, I can contribute to this because it's still a rough idea. It's okay. I can sort of still contribute to this and I can give feedback, because it doesn't feel like you're critiquing someone's beautiful work. You're just adding to the idea. So there's different types of prototypes depending on the layer of the design process. So if you're making an experience or a service design solution, you might create a service blueprint or a role play or a storyboard that displays the process or journey the person would go through in this experience. If you're making a thing like a product, you might make a cardboard model and use other things like markers and different things around the house to demonstrate it. So for example, IDEO was trying to design a tool for surgery, and they were talking with the client, the surgeon, about what it was, and they were struggling to get it across. And so to demonstrate what it was, they grabbed a marker, some cardboard, and I think it was like duct tape, and they duct taped it all together, and they held this mock-up of this handheld tool. And the person was like, yeah, it would have a trigger here and it would be like this. And they, together with just everyday objects, they created what it would look like and how it would feel. And this was great because they actually gave a physical representation of the solution. As I mentioned, with apps and digital solutions, it could be a wireframe. If it's a bit more high definition, you might use something like Figma, where you're making what's called a Wizard of Oz prototype, where it looks exactly like the website, but it has no code in the background. So it has hyperlinks to different pages. You can demonstrate how it would look and feel, but it doesn't actually literally do anything. Just like in the Wizard of Oz, how the Wizard of Oz makes things look like he's a big thing with shadows and he can do magic with smoke, but it's all fake. And this is how you do lots of prototypes with apps and digital. You can also just do sketches and you can also use journey maps for apps. If it's an event, you might trial run it. You might do a really cheap version of the event, in a hall, just to test elements and aspects of the idea. You might even just make an Eventbrite page and see if people click to attend, and just say that you might just make the event, and then you see how likely people to join. And if people don't join it, you don't make the event. You don't actually deliver the event. You just see based on what you've written on the Eventbrite page. If people are interested and they click, then that's possibly a good idea. You might even make a mock invitation that displays all the features and has a visual of what it would look like. And so these are just some ideas of different types of prototypes. It's really a way to demonstrate the idea in a physical way that is closer to reality than just speaking the idea or written or a basic sketch. So you take this prototype that you've created based on your research, based on what you've discovered through the whole design thinking process, and you test it with real people. You might go back to the original people you interviewed and you show them, you don't tell, so you show them the idea, you show them the prototype, and you get them to interact with it. And the aim is to speak as little as possible. You might do a brief preamble and explanation, but the best insights you're going to get is by observing them trying to use what you've created and hearing what they say. So you say, can you speak out loud what you're thinking as you interact with this or as you use this? So typically with a physical thing, you might give it to them and see what they do with it. You might ask open-ended questions like, what stands out to you? How would you use this? What would make this more useful? You don't want to be asking leading questions. You don't want to be saying things like trying to get their positive feedback. We all want praise, and you've got to work really hard not to seek that praise, but seek real tangible feedback, because you want to make the best design possible. You really want that critique, because that critique will help you use it. And you might learn things about the prototype. I remember I made a really bad prototype when I was at uni, and basically I was trying to explain this service we wanted to create for this project, and I made a video on my phone, and I was just talking through, because it was during COVID, so I couldn't really, and I was talking through, I was trying to make like a bit of a journey map verbally through my phone, so it wasn't good, and I was talking into the phone about it, and I sent it off to some friends, but the feedback I received was actually on the quality of this bad prototype. They were saying, oh, it would have been better if you'd made the video this way, da-da-da-da-da. They weren't listening to the idea, and that's because there wasn't enough connection. The prototype, it wasn't a connection, it was me explaining the prototype. It would have been better for me to make something that is clearly a prototype of the example. Maybe I could have made a journey map that shows the journey the person would go through with this sustainability object and how they use it and what they do. But instead I I'd try to do a quick video, and there is some merit to doing something quickly, but in this case, it just didn't work. And I mean, that's a big part of design thinking, is that you're okay with failure. You learn from it, and I learn a lot from that process. And now I know that if I'm making prototypes, it's got to be clearly something. It's got to be tangible, and it's got to relate to the solution. If it's just a video of me explaining, and often you're working with people who aren't designers, so they don't know what a prototype is, you want it to be something that's clearly on its way to be a thing, on its way to explain a process, you know. I think if I was to do it again, I'd give more context. I'd say, I'm going to send a video that is explaining a service we're creating around sustainability and at a university. I've got an object that we've worked towards. It's actually it wasn't an object, it was a campaign around sustainability and getting people to talk about on social media how they're sustainable. So it's already a bit complex as an idea. And so I would explain it, I'd give context, and I'd say, I want you to give feedback on, and I'd say the concept, the idea, is this something that you would do? I'd probably, because it was COVID as well, it wasn't an interview, and I sent it out in a video message app, you know, it's a Facebook app. So I'd give all this context, and then I'd ask for the feedback, rather than just sending it and saying, can you give feedback on this? Because people didn't know what to give feedback on. So therefore, they gave feedback on the quality of the video and my speaking, and it was a good learning. It's sometimes we don't know what we need to do until we've failed at it. So I really invite you throughout this process to just hold on to a process, an attitude of fail first. Just try and fail and learn from that. And what do you learn from it? So yes, you interview various stakeholders. And so if it's a more complex solution that you're designing, you would interview both the users, so the students, international students, but also the university staff about how they think this could be applied and developed. And just like in the define phase, you gather all that information and you start to make an affinity map and identify patterns within that feedback. And you take the common bits of feedback and you make iterations to your design, changes to it to make it more usable and more useful for the people. Then you make prioritized changes, which are the most important to change and adapt and add. And then you make changes to that prototype. Then you repeat. And you might do 2 or 3 rounds of this iteration and feedback. And again, this all depends on how much time you have. Finally, you take all this feedback and you package it into the final product. You give a clear summary of the idea. You have supporting visuals or walkthroughs of the idea, the prototype. You create some artifacts that demonstrate what it is, what you learned from testing, and why the solution matters. So this might be that you deliver 3 different events with the schedule, the invitations, even the Eventbrites. So you've got it all ready for them to go and try. Alternatively, you might just deliver the idea, depending on what they are expecting, and then they go off and do that. Some other things that you need to do, it doesn't just end with an idea, it has some tangible aspects around it that help bring this idea to life. So you have implementation considerations. So you might deliver a roadmap on what the client needs to do now, what they need to do next, and what they need to do later. So you've gone through that thinking around prioritizing what are the actions that need to be taken, what's the budget for this idea, who needs to be involved, how are you going to do it, what are you going to deliver. You might do a stakeholder map. So who needs to be involved? You'll map it out, all the different people and what involvement they need. Is it just that they need to be informed, or are they going to be active participants in designing this? You might do an influence matrix. So considering who's going to have the most impact and who needs to be convinced. You might even consider different strategies for how you'll deliver these events. So it might be something where you form an international student committee and they can be on the group that helps design and consider these events to get people involved. You might share different stakeholders that would be most interesting to be involved, whether it's like dental facilities if they're a part of the university, or the counselling staff, and names of events that they could deliver. You might also do a business model canvas where you will share what are the resources that are needed for this solution, who are the partners that need to be involved, what are the costs, what's the revenue if you're going to have revenue, and you'll provide a summary of the other ideas for future use. And support implementation for this next phase. So really, you're handing over the solution with a whole lot of support of how the client will deliver it. Now, they might come and say, we want you now to put this together and make it into a tangible thing that's finished and ready to deliver. And that's another project. But you can see that you're at the end of the design thinking process, but then you start again. So it might be that you then have to do research on how to implement it and test it and put it into place. And it's an ongoing process, and it's a new loop. So this is really a rough explanation of the 4 phases of the double diamond. And I hope it's helpful in your own journey. And you'll find that depending on what sort of solution you're designing, it's going to be different every single time. It's not neat. It's not going to neatly go. You're not going to neatly go through these 4 phases. You'll learn things along the way. You'll try different methods and work out different ways to deliver them. And it's an ongoing process. I'm still learning it. I've been doing design thinking since 2016, but I'm still learning it and finding new ways to do things and new ways to solve problems. So it's quite a comprehensive framework that is evolving in itself, and I hope that this is helpful. All right, good luck with your design thinking process, and thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to today's show. Make sure you subscribe to keep track of all the episodes, and I look forward to having you here again. Have a great day.